Okay, so we're going to talk about diets now. I can look at a blood test and see what our children are allergic to. You can't appreciate that on this slide, but this child's going to have to go off of dairy. They've got allergies to dairy. These aren't the anaphylactic type of allergies. These aren't the I'm getting a rash, my eyes are swelling, my tongue is swelling kind of allergies. These are allergies that cause inflammation in the brain, and they can cause some GI upset. Here's a picture of a racehorse. It's a multi-million-dollar racehorse, one of the best racehorses ever, Secretariat. What do you think the owner of this horse back in those days fed this horse? Nothing but the best. This horse got the finest food ever. What do we feed our kids? Aren't our kids a little more precious than a racehorse? And yet we feed them this. Now, I was looking at this and I was saying, gee, there must be something in marketing about red and yellow. Okay? But what we're doing is we feed our kids this, we kind of get sucked into this in our lifestyle, and when a family comes to me saying, I need you to repair my kid's brain, I need you to fix this, I'm going to tell them, I can't fix it if the child's ingesting this kind of fuel, because this is garbage. You wouldn't give it to a racehorse. You certainly can't give it to your kid, but we get stuck giving them French fries and hamburgers and Happy Meals and chicken nuggets. Oh my gosh, chicken nuggets. You guys are laughing. You know that picture. The fast foods do have a lot of problems. They use a lot of MSG, preservatives, deep fat frying. They have agents in there that can cause cancer that we all shouldn't be eating, high fructose corn syrup. I mean, when you get the eggs and they pour them from a carton, how did you put eggs in a carton? What do you think's in there besides just eggs? There's a real problem. And that was just a short list. I could have gone a whole hour on the problems with fast food and liver functions and all. If we're going to get serious about fixing our kids' brain, how they respond to stimuli, I had one GI doctor say, it's silliness, what you're saying, Dr. Jerry. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you know, when you ingest foods, all of those toxins go to the liver and they don't get to the brain. And I'll say, have you ever drank a glass of wine? I mean, don't tell me that it doesn't get to the brain and affect behavior. Foods affect behavior. Many of us know that. Many of us have had the wrong foods. Special diets. Well, when I have somebody in my clinic or I'm talking to a large group, I can tell you that 80% of my practice, and even beyond, because people come and tell me that they heard me speak once, and they said, Doc, when we took out dairy, when we took out gluten, we had a different kid. We started sleeping through the night, we started making eye contact, stools changed, we were just much happier, we were more present, we were more with it, we were more involved. The kid was just great. So I always say remove dairy. Always remove dairy. But how can you possibly exist without dairy? Do you know that there are cultures that once they're breastfed, they don't do dairy anymore? I could think of one, the Asian culture. You ever get cheese on your mushu pork? They don't do dairy. It's cultural. Another group of people who don't do well with dairy are my black Africans, my Ethiopians, my South Africans. They don't do well with dairy. So we can live without dairy, number one. Number two, just because you come to America doesn't mean that now you can have dairy. Now, people who thrive on dairy are my Italians, obviously, and my French folks. See, I have folks from all around the world who come and see me, so I get to get a peek into their culture. But everybody has to give up something, okay? You know, it's kind of funny when I see Asian families, usually it's dairy we have to remove, but it's also soy. That doesn't go over big. But my Italian families who come and see me, I have to get rid of pasta. So everybody has to give up something in their culture pretty much. And then we have to do selective removal of specific foods that your child might be sensitive to, which might be peanuts or soy, or it might be oranges, citrus products. But there's usually something that the children, if we remove, are going to improve with. But true addictions to certain foods can make these transitions very, very difficult. Some of these kids, well, are very self-limited anyway, so we got to be careful. I mean, my son Josh was only eating Chips Ahoy cookies, bacon, Fruit Loops, French fries, and a gallon of milk every day. I mean, that was what he was eating. And when I told my wife we have to go gluten-free and dairy-free, she goes, well, I know what dairy is, but what's gluten? Because we didn't know back then. That was big. But there are many, many diets out there. I could spend probably 2 hours talking about each individual diet out there. The main thing is to find the right diet for the right child. I'm glad this diet helps this little guy over here, but it did nothing over here. If you're not allergic to peanuts, please eat peanuts. But if you're having problems with them, let's get rid of them. Okay. So laboratory investigations can help me figure out what diets might be best, but trial and error is usually best. My rule of thumb is whatever they're addicted to, probably you need to get rid of that. Okay. I had one child who, in the course of speaking with the family for an hour, ate 5 lemons. I don't know about diet, but that's not normal. Let's not do any more lemons. Or they'll eat 4 bananas, or they crave apples, or they crave anything carbohydrate junkies. Probably not a good thing for them. Try to be as organic as possible, cook from scratch, avoid the processed foods, the ones that come in packages. This is the one that always irked my wife. The pre-made gluten-free foods always tend to be very high in sugars because they're getting rid of one thing, so they're going to make it really sweet. But speaking of sugars, here's a little guy I got involved with a long time ago who the psychiatrist said he has a severe thought and mood disorder and needs to be put on lithium. And this little guy is 8 years old. He's playing Little League Baseball. He's tearing his room apart right now. He's in a full outrage. You probably can't appreciate his face is beet red right now. He's just going nuts. And these parents were really smart. They did the strong-willed child, dare to discipline. They gave him, if you do this, you'll get that. If you do this, you'll get that kind of behavior. Nothing changed his kid's behavior. Once he got into this tirade, there was no stopping him until he reset. Now, this kid doesn't have autism. This was my second boy, John. And this was well before autism even hit my radar. This was God teaching me that foods can affect behaviors in kids. I was getting prepped. Foods can affect behaviors. The psychiatrist wanted to put him on lithium. But then I found this article. Eicosanoids as an inflammatory mediator. There's that word inflammation again. Remember, we started talking about inflammation in the gut, all the itises and stuff like this. Eicosanoids as inflammatory mediators, the sugar link to mood and bad behaviors. The sugar link. This was published in 1990. This is like last century stuff. The American Academy of Pediatrics came out in the 80s and said, hey, a myth out there is that sugar causes behavioral changes. The American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm thinking, ask any teacher before Easter or Halloween if sugar doesn't affect their kids' behaviors and focus and concentration and the consumption of certain fats and or sugar, starch and carbohydrates, and our kids who have ADD tend to be sugar and carbohydrate junkies, influence the production of these inflammatory mediators, and then there's vascular effects. So the question would be, do I have to use Ritalin on this kid with ADD, or do I have to get junk food out of his diet? So diets do affect behavior. Sugars are a culprit, dairy is a culprit, gluten is a culprit, and then there may be some individual things that each child shares. From a nutritional point of view, my son has diabetes, so we see an endocrinologist, and I tell him what I do for a living, and he's rolling his eyes, and yeah, let's just work on the diabetes here. 3 months later, I go back to see him. He couldn't wait to see me. He was so excited to see me. And I said, why? He said, well, because I made my first diagnosis of scurvy in an autistic patient. Why? Well, the child obviously was not eating any citrus products and wasn't getting any vitamins and developed scurvy. So when we have these children who have very self-selected diets, we need to think about just taking a dietary history, cookies, bacon, Fruit Loops, French fries, milk, we're going to be really deficient in a lot of things, especially if this has been several years. Well, of course we have to put them on vitamins. So what are we doing here? Well, when we think about putting our kids on supplements, we want to optimize and improve the function of the immune system, obviously improve mental functions. This doesn't work on husbands, by the way. Improve red cell membrane function, reduce autistic behaviors, improve GI function, and minimize the negative genetic influences, things that you were born with, things that you just have. So vitamins and minerals usually need to be replenished in our group of kids. They have to be high quality. They can't come from China. They can't be mass produced. They have to be things that are absorbable, things that are utilizable by the body, clinically relevant doses. Digestive enzymes, like I said, very important because many of our kids lack digestive juices. Omega-3 fatty acids, that's the oils like cod liver oil, and soluble fiber.